How's it going, YouTube? We're here today to talk about the new X-Men comic books. I got House of X here. I've got Powers of X here. And I've read them a couple times now. And let's just go ahead and jump right into the comic book. So, starting off, we got a quote here from Professor X. Humans of planet Earth, while you slept, the world changed. And I noticed down here on the bottom, this is Xavier Alpha, and I'll point that out again at the end of the video. Not the end, but when I get to the end of the comic. So, I got these little birthing pods, and this pink-purple light, which is an important color I've noticed in the comics, the first two comics. And this is Professor X, and they're hatching right here. Got some mutants, Cyclops, Jean Grey, something like that. Because his eyes are like that. But there's definitely Professor X, and he says, "To me, my X-Men." And bam! So it says the House of X, the house that Xavier built, and we jump right into it. So the comic book starts off with it saying it's on Krakoa, and Colossus is picking the plant. And then 4 months ago, Westchester. So we got Storm with a plant, Blue Area of the Moon with a plant, Mars, and they're planting a plant, Savage Land planting a plant, DC planting a plant. 2 weeks ago, Jerusalem habitat. And this is it's like Stepford twins or whatever, 3 telekinesis, from when Bendis was writing Uncanny X-Men. I'm sure they're in the comics before then, but so you can see what's happened now, 2 weeks later, and these ambassadors are showing up, and they're saying how when Charles Xavier unexpectedly telecommunicates to you to come, you come, basically. And so here we get a little talk about this new drug that says it extends human life 5 years, it prevents disease of the mind, and is the most effective adaptive antibiotic the world has ever seen. So they're all curious to see what's going on. Whatever. So we progress, and we're shown what's inside this habitat, is what it's called. In Jerusalem, the Jerusalem habitat, and they are confronted by Magneto, which is a surprise because they thought they were about to talk to Professor X, and so then it gets Hickman-y, where it gets like some little bit of a breakdown. So if you weren't paying attention too much, there's a drug from the flowers of Krakoa. So the mutant island Krakoa is not just the home of mutants and the seat of their nation state. It is also the only known producer of the primary economic resource of the mutant nation, the flowers of Krakoa. So for humans, this flower produces a drug that extends the life of a human for 5 years. It is a universal antibiotic, a super drug for humans, and it produces a cure for diseases of the mind in humans. And for mutants, what they do is one makes a gateway, which is a pathway from where one plant is planted to its twin on Krakoa. So you can get from one place to another. And then a habitat, which is like a biodome. It's a self-sustaining environment, a biome. This is part of the interconnected consciousness of Krakoa. And then you have the no place, was what it's called. So this is a place within the island that he doesn't know about, doesn't know exist. A Krakoan tumor, what it says. That comes up, and that's part of the connecting between the two issues of why you have to read both. But that definitely does, come up. That's why it's there. So now we're getting our first scene of Jean Grey taking some X-Men into a gateway for the first time and traveling through it. And then we're introduced to new mutants, which his name is Cypher and Sage is both their names. And basically what he's done is he has made like a surveillance system of everybody traveling through Krakoa for all of the mutants. So they get there and they're like, oh wow, I see, you know, Professor X and Wolverine, and notice the color again that I mentioned. This color definitely pops up. Next page you get is a map of Krakoa and like where it's located, which is like above Australia. And then these are all different habitats in Krakoa. And then there's other ones all throughout the world, like Jerusalem, but they're not showing them on the map of what all ones are out there. So then we jump over to, so we end up getting into space, and what we're introduced to is, her name is Dr. Alia Gregor, and she works with AIM, and she boards what's called the Forge. And while they're here, she's also with, her name is Karima, and she's an Omega Sentinel. Karima. She's an Omega Sentinel, so she's a Sentinel. And they're here because this place has reactivated itself. It's called the Orcus Protocol. And they are activated because of a threat of mutation and doomsday is why, and it's revealed that what's controlling it, the machines that's running the whole thing out in the edges of space, is Master Mold, which is like a creator of Sentinels and stuff, and so he's the one that reactivated this thing, and the machines are running it or whatever, and then it goes down into what exactly is going down. So it's basically saying it's recruitment of assets of AIM, Shield, Strike, Sword, Alpha Flight, Hammer, Armor, Hydra, as well as funding from black budgets and other human-centric financial consideration, absorptions and adaptation of various organizational assets into the next generation infrastructure built for doomsday. So it tells you, like right here, so this is what's going on. So 1 year ago, instances of X gene activation have spiked along with the reemergence of established mutant alpha types long observed as active in the mutant cause. So mutants are popping up a lot everywhere. 6 months ago, Charles Xavier quietly purchases the 7th largest pharmaceutical company in the world, recently announced 3 new drugs which are poised to destabilize the industry and spread throughout global financial sectors, and the mutination of Krakoa is established 2 months ago. So this is what's going on. So then that's what activates Master Mold into going on. And so and here's where you get the names of the people and the Omega Sentinel, the 2 characters that board the spaceship. So then you get a scene of Mystique, Sabretooth, and Toad stealing information from Damage Control. And then they try to make their escape, and she's trying to explain, like, you shouldn't have hurt all these people. You're supposed to be in and out. And so then the Fantastic Four show up, and then it's Paul's lets you know what's going on. So basically, Damage Control is a storage facility made up of exclusive advanced schematics and disassembled material created known by Reed Richards and Tony Stark. And specifically, it points out Soul's hammer, which is one from Hickman's Avengers run, which is during the incursions and the Shi'ar try to invade and destroy the Earth or something like that. And Soul's hammer is like a weapon that wiped out their military. And the Shi'ar do pop back up into the comics, X-Men comics. So this has got to be important. There's a reason why that is like that. And it says right here that in recent past, both Stark and Richards have gone to great lengths to ensure their technology did not fall into the hands of entities like damage control, but their normal avenue of evasion, like control of their intellectual property of each other, failed when Richards was missing for a prolonged period of time and Stark was presumed dead. Rights to all current material are being contested. So they gave each other rights, they both went missing, dead, and stuff went screwed. So then we're showed what it looks like when you go into one of these portals. You get into this like gateway area, this hub area, and it's told that mutants have made up their own mutant language, and that this plan is a huge plan, that this is the start of something huge. So then they're showing like, yes, then you can go through all kinds of different areas. So these are different habitats, and like where the Krakoa gateways are planted. And so they show them, they have all kinds of different environments and places they can live. And so then it's mentioned about how this could be used for war advantages, but Magneto explains how they've never once have even actually had a mutant war happen on that kind of scale, them taking over like they could. So then the scene jumps back to the damage control scene. So Toad gets a gateway open. So clearly they're working with the X-Men or something, if they've got gateway access too. And so it's kind of confusing what's going on, the purpose of this, but Toad makes it through. Mystique makes it through. Sabretooth hits a wall, that's what it appears to be, and he gets caught by Invisible Woman, Sue Storms, and Mr. Fantastic is there, and they talk about someone's coming through the portal, and would you believe it, it's Cyclops. So then, whole confrontation goes down, congratulating Ben on his wedding. Hi, Sue. Looking good. I'm about to take off Sabretooth off you, and it's like, nah. He broke a lot of laws, and we can't just let you guys just be doing what you want to do. I got a problem with that. And, Cyclops, fair enough. You feel strongly about this. I'm going to let you keep him. We'll deal with this another time. Sabretooth's pissed. And then it's like, oh, by the way, greet your son for me and tell him he has a family on Krakoa waiting for him when he's ready. Which is like, what? If you didn't know that, and then it's Omega level, and it shows you in red again. Franklin Richards is an Omega level mutant. And Omega level mutants are mutants whose dominant power is deemed to register or reach undefinable upper limit of that power's specific classification. And then it goes into Magneto and Forge, because Forge can be beaten. He's been beaten plenty of times. That's what makes him not an Omega level mutant, but because Magneto's powers, specifically for magnetism right here, that makes him an Omega level. Then it goes through and breaks down everybody who's Omega level mutant and their power that is Omega. That makes them that. Which will probably come up. And it's mentioned that Krakoa was made to be like a place where eventually they want to have all of these Omega level mutants be at. So we're back here at Jerusalem, where Magneto's like, so what have you learned? And they're like, oh, well, no, I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to her. She basically reads all their minds. And for example, Mayadu is actually head of the state science office. Both he and influential members of parliament are eager to agree to our terms. They say this as political and scientific opportunity. Our asymmetry represents Jane Perry Cole as ambassador, but he bought it with his private sector pharmaceutical money. He'll agree to Xavier's terms if we allow him special access to our drugs. So everybody has their different reasons. And one guy brought a gun. And Xavier's just like, huh. Like, and I'm about to tell you, I could throw you out, but you're basically a sheep looking like a wolf. And I know you're all wolves. And that you can tell them this, that we've made you an offer. This is non-negotiable. I know exactly what I sound like. It feels so great to say this. You know how you love your symbolism as much as you love your religion. I want you to, and I need you to understand this. You have your new gods now. So then it ends with a quote from Magneto. And from what I was mentioning in the beginning, it shows Professor X, and it says a quote from him, and it says down at the bottom, Xavier Alpha, and here it says Magneto Omega. So they appear to be friends, but this is definitely indicating Alpha Omega. They are not probably going to work out like we believe so. So then we jump on into Powers of X, which is the second comic book the storyline, and these are going to be each are 6 issues. They're both $5.99. These are both the cover A's, and they are going to then start off again with X-Men #1. So here we start off with a quote from Myra McTaggart, who is kind of like Professor X, and she's the leader of the New Mutants. And it's like people who have crazy power levels, something like that. And then we get, why is it called Powers of X? So 10 times 0 would be 0. So basically, you're 1. 10 times 1 would be 10. 10 times 10 would be 100. And 100 times 10 would be 1,000. 10 times 10 times 10. So that's, x to the 0 power, x to 1 power. That's what that means. And it's saying this is the beginning, the dream, the world present day, 100 years from now, and 1,000 years in ascension. So they finally, it happens. So, back to that color, as you can see, this fortune teller, who's right here with no glowing object, is glowing object when Professor Xavier walks by, and sits on a bench. He's happy. Myra McTaggart walks up to him, isn't talking to him, you're having a good day. Then she explains how she went past that fortune teller with that glowing orb, and she saw the magician, the metal metamorph, the great sword, and the girl with 1 foot in 2 worlds, the tower and the axis, the pillar of collapse and rebirth, the monolith of ascension, and the devil, the red god, and the lost cardinal of the last religion. So this is all important stuff that will pop up all in the future. That's why the fortune teller told her. So she starts talking about how she kind of knows who Charles Xavier is. And he's telling her how he had a dream of this amazing idea. She had this amazing dream, which is the beginning of everything. And she says, which is the quote of the beginning of the comic. Well, here's the thing, Charles. It's not a dream. It's not a dream if it's real. And he gives her this look. And he's like, do we know one another? Oh, yes, we go back quite a few. We go back quite a ways. Who are you? Why don't you read my mind, Charles? Read my mind and see. And then we get that color again. Pops up, and his eyes are like shocked. And we leave this, and we do not come back to this scene. So I'm going to call it now. I think Powers of X is going to have a huge scene that they're referring to that they've been hyping up for a while. Or at least I think this is what they're referencing to, which is under a lot of speculation. So then, jump into it, and it says right here, The Last Dream of Professor X, issue 1 of Powers of X. So, skip to page. Spoiler. That's all this video is going to be. So, present day, year 10, the portal's opening. It's Toad and Mystique, and she's got the flash drive from the first issue of Damage Control. And so she's going into the House of M, and it's either that could be her house, Mystique, or Magneto. I think it's cool because of literally the panel below. It says right here, a home of dreamers and true believers, House of Marvel. That's really clever. So basically saying, well done, you did your job. And she's like, well, hold on a second. And I have my own demands. And Charles says, is helping your fellow mutant not reward enough for Raven Darkholm? No, it isn't. I need more. And he takes the drive away from her, and he's never used that kind of power before. And she hits him back with what he just told her. Isn't helping your fellow mutant not reward enough for the great Charles Xavier? We're building a better world. And it's weird how he's inserting this technology into the plant. That's what it looks like. So then we go 100 years into the future. We have a dead mutant, this new mutant X-Men team. We have like a cyborg, Sentinel, and they mention how there's another mutant. Her name is Silo Bell, and that she is, I'll get into what she is. She's a new character, and it's mentioned that where are your other partners that you're here with, and they're stealing information from this place called the Nexus. So they're being watched by two people. We're introduced to our first character. Her name is Rasputin, and his name is Cardinal. And it's basically, he's saying, I'm going to open a portal because he's not really a fighter. And, he'll wait for them and close it. If they don't come. And she's like, well, I'm going to get save the girl or whatever. Silo Bell. And so she runs into battle, fighting, destroying stuff, and then right when the portal is opening up and opens and they're ready to get out of here, a gigantic Sentinel comes down, which destroys. It's really cool. Artwork's really amazing. And then it's realized that her friend that she was trying to save gets captured, and she can't get to her in time. She's not going to be able to save her. Basically, goodbye. And Jonathan Hickman style, bam, you get the story time. So what's going on here is the sinister line. So it says when the population level of mutants reached a crisis point and the constant evasion, relocation, confrontation cycle made a systematic mutant propagation impossible, the remaining mutant leadership approved the creation of the sinister breeding pits of Mars. Under the expert hand of Chief Mutant Geneticist Mr. Sinister, this strategy mirrored the Earth-based Sentinel Hound program, but instead of focusing on the interbreeding of mutants with powers that lent themselves to detection, pursuit, and deception, the Sinister strategy focused on mutants with power sets that have more aggressive militaristic traits. And then it mentions these lost years of mutant leadership followed the almost universal death or disappearance of senior leaders and preceding the fall of Krakoa and Mars. Many believed rampant rumors that the lost years were not accidental but purposeful. So something was, on purpose to happen, and this is before the fall of Krakoa and Mars. So we know that's going to happen. And then we're mentioned about Chimera. So first generation of sinister mutants were designed to be divergent copies of a singular DNA source with a pure, uncompromised X gene. So, commonly referred to as a fodder inside the breeding pits. These mutant soldiers were trained in the Martian underground until they reached the age of 16, at which time they traveled to Krakoa to defend the mutant nation state until it fell 30 years later. So they were breeding mutants and sending them to Krakoa to battle until it fell. The second wave and third generations of mutants are referred to as the Chimera class. The second Chimera generation produced mutants that had DNA composed of two separate X genes, resulting in a mutant with mostly predictable combined power set of source mutants. The third Chimera generation produced mutants with an amalgamated DNA featuring up to 5 X genes. Outside of a predictable failure rate, this third generation of chimeras were universally successful against the man-machine supremacy. So these were made to fight against all the Sentinels that are coming. Man-machine supremacy, Nimrod and stuff. And many believed this would be the turning point in the war. However, the fourth generation of sinister mutants suffered a systematic failure. The entire batch of these Omega-based Chimera mutants was produced with a corruptive hive mind that was only discovered to be defective after they had destroyed 40% of the remaining mutant populations. They started making Omega-level mutants that wipe people out. That caused the fall of Krakoa itself and eventually committed mass suicide. They eventually committed mass suicide, collapsing Mars and the sinister pits and themselves into a singularity. This is Rasputin. So she has telepathic something, telekinesis from Choir. Rasputin, so Colossus's power. Bane, Full, Kitty Pride's phasing, healing someone, but she has 5 different powers. Outliers. Like any experiment, Sinister's breeding program would produce results that fell outside of the expected range of failure rate. Every generation of mutant chimeras had outliers, but the expectation was that these failures would be controllable at worst and acceptable at best. So, Generation had a 0.3% of failing, Generation 2 had 1.2% failing, Generation 3 had 9% failing, so it spiked a little, and then Generation 4 had 62.3%, huge failure percent. Generation 3 had 10% failure rate, where in spite of their Being bred for war, these mutants develop passive peacetime power sets. Almost all of these outlier mutants also had personality profiles that lent themselves to pacifism and obsession with creationists. They also rejected the idea of personal identities and refused individual names. These variants were all called cardinals. So this is what cardinal is and why he doesn't like to fight. Because even though Generation 3 with the 5 things were bred for war, some of them, have this basically defective part of them that like him. And then there's the betrayal. The fall of Krakoa and destruction of the Martian breeding pits was directly preceded by the betrayal of mutants by Mr. Sinister. Retrospectively, it is obvious that Mr. Sinister was playing a longer game of self-interest that superseded any formal association or alliance. And while the failings of Generation 4 mutants were clearly a design flaw baked into their design, it is now believed that most of the random circumstances that led to the creation of the Sinister's program were in fact orchestrated by him. The nature of that man, Sinister, reaches far beyond any hope of redemption. There could be no salvation for the devil himself. Sinister was publicly executed by the man-machine supremacy after defecting. So, back to the story. We're at the Tower of Nimrod and the human-machine monolith. And the woman that they captured is being brought to him, and she calls her a hound from Sal Kennel. You're looking at the last strain of mutant produced through our own breeding program. So the Sentinels have their own mutants that they breeded called hounds. And he basically is apologizing and saying that we bred you not only to be a slave but betray your own people. How in good and just world did a higher functioning programs like ourselves believe that would ever be a good idea? But speaking personally, I find it encouraging that you failed us because bad ideas should be a bad death. So he's basically, they're trying to get information from her, and they're not going to be able to because of her being this black brain mutant and protective of that they're going to have to give her what's called a bath. And then he's getting all excited about giving her this thing called a bath, which is where they put her, and they plan to put all mutants inside of this like tank that it's a respiratory type system that keeps them alive, and I don't know if it's draining their powers, but it's getting that knowledge and information and stuff from them. And it's basically what he mentions, making his own artificial intelligence of his own, is basically his own brood, which is going to be really cool if the brood pop up. And I mean, oh my god. So as you fade away into nothingness, do try to find it in your heart to forgive me. And basically puts her in this tank and it sucks her life force and knowledge or whatever all the way. She's still alive in that thing or something. So then it explains what the kennel is. Sentinel mutant breeding caps. The Salkin kennel was built to be the pinnacle of man-machine ascendancy's breeding program to produce hounds. Hounds, which were mutants bred in captivity to hunt other mutants, were originally designed to present as subspecies with dehumanizing affections. These were meant to generate fear and sympathy in their intended targets, but these designs were quickly abandoned after several generations because, being broken and dependent, they were ineffective hunters of their own kind. However, modified versions of hounds, like the final ones bred in the Salkin kennel, like the character we just saw, Silo Bell, the They were created with unreadable black brains and conditioned for insurgence and duplicity. And while the few hounds who were successfully deployed proved to be lethally effective, the majority of them, as they were bred for betrayal, defective in support of their own kind, and became some of the mutants' most effective warriors. South Kennel was destroyed 10 years ago, along with all biological and research material. So, because they were, bred for betrayal, they became their own independent people and own X-Men. X-Men's best warriors. So now we're seeing what the other Krakoa seed is, the No Place Hub. And Rasputin and Cardinal are coming out, and they are introduced to Wolverine's X-Men team, which also has Groot. And they're wondering, did they get what they were supposed to? And they got it. And Wolverine says, follow me, the old man's waiting. So that's going to be huge, because if Wolverine's surviving 100 years, who's older than Wolverine? So, then we go on to surviving mutants. So, the total mutant population under the man-machine supremacy. The current estimated number of surviving Homo sapiens superior is currently believed to be less than 10,000. The vast majority of these mutants are transplants, refugees, no longer living on Earth or in their native solar system. Two main colonies, which make up the bulk of the refugees, exist in the Shi'ar space. The first, Benevolence, is a converted transit location located on the fringe of Shi'ar space, where it has long served as a buffer between the Empire and the wild space spawning grounds of brood breeding territory. Awesome. The current number of mutants living on Benevolence is just under 8,000. The second mutant colony is located on the Shi'ar throne world of Chandelier. The less than 2,000 mutants who live here are by treaty with the Empire warrior stock for the Imperial Guards. That's cool. Currently, 6 mutants serve as Super Guardians and 57 of Super Guardian classification. So that's going to be really cool to see what that is all about. It has long been whispered in Imperial circles that Empress Sandra has always had ambitious plans to annex the Sol System, and the mutant guardsmen are being cultivated to be sympathetic conquerors as an emollient for the Imperial rule. Inside the mutant community, it is hoped that should this come to pass, the surviving mutants can serve as seed stock for repopulation. So here's a little map. All living mutants in the Sol System are currently citizens of Asteroid K. After the recent deaths of X-Hound Silobel, which is the one who was put into the water thing, and the Ghost Percival, which is the one we found dead on the ground, the current population of Asteroid K is 8. So I'm believing, because these two are being part of that 8, so Wolverine and them must be part of that, so there's 6. The person he's talking about would be 7, and we don't know who 8 would be. If you're keeping track. So then we go year 1000, and is this Silobel? We're losing them, and there's nothing I can do to prevent it. There's too much machinery floating around inside there and not enough soul to save, let alone copy. The blame is not yours, librarian. So here's Nimrod. Archive of Nimrod. Database. It's mine. I wasn't built to maintain integrity for a millennium. It's no one's fault, Nimrod. See? You did exactly what you were made to do. You created a collective consciousness of mutantdom, a living database of Homo superior in order to provide a tactical advantage in a war Who could have known how pointless and useless that war would be? Who at a time could have seen the surprising end of the human machine mutant war? Homo sapiens. So, Homo sapiens, so good to be done with all that. So, Homo sapiens must be all gone. Mutant has ascended. Are we done with them? Can we ever really done with the past after all? That's what a legacy is. And here we see the preserve. And that's why we keep dinosaur bones around as a reminder of our great sins of history. And even better to preserve a remnant of something to point at. And hopes to God that they never have dominion again. So mutants have now taken control of this future of humans, basically. It ends with the quote that we see from Rasputin said in the beginning of earlier in the comic. You've forgotten that machines have no soul, and that humans lost theirs a long time ago. So that is Powers of X. And House of X. And they were both great comics. I enjoyed them a lot. They take some rereading. I definitely enjoyed House of X more than I liked Powers of X. But I would say this one is a 5 and this one 4 to 4.5 out of 5. It's not a bad comic or anything like that. But other than that, yeah, this is a great start. And I definitely am anticipating that the both House of X 2 was already being hyped at Comic-Con by a lot of people, being a special issue. Finding out if Powers of X 2 is going to show that scene that was mentioned in here. I definitely am thinking that both part 2s of the issues are going to be huge, and if they are equally as good, if not better than these two comics, we are off to a fantastic start for X-Men. Like, an amazing start. I'm going to be disappointed when Hickman's done because I might not enjoy it when he's done. But I loved it, and let me know in the comments what you think. Let me know if I missed anything or things you wanted to point out. Yeah,